Hello and welcome to the Grand Quest Game. I am Kelly Blanchard and I play Sifina. Unfortunately, last week's game was not able to be recorded because we had some technical issues. So I have been asked to do a recap. So let's get into it, shall we? We start in the woods. It's raining. We just finished fighting these undead wolves. Our party is in a wagon with two merchants and a blood hunter who had helped us get away. We are injured, most of us at least, and diseased. Miss Sifina is the worst. So very quickly, Trevor decides to cure her disease, and he goes around and he starts helping the others, curing them. So once Sifina has been cured, she heals herself, and then she's finally able to pay attention to what's going on around her. And the merchants begin to talk. They're curious about who we are and where we come from, but of course that is a secret, one we cannot tell. So from these merchants we learn that we are going to a place named Grave. Apparently it was founded by some grave clerics. And in this place, this country that we are, it is tradition to burn the dead. Otherwise, they will come back as undead. So they always do that, but of course they cannot bury every animal that is out there. Every animal in the woods that dies, they cannot bury them because they don't even know they even exist. So that is why creatures in woods, like the wolves, they become undead. So finally we arrive in the town of Grave, and immediately we are met by the blood hunter superior, Warwitch. Now of course he is very suspicious of us and questions us. He very much wants to know where we are from. He won't let us into town unless he knows that. But that is the one secret that we have been commanded not to tell. So Sifina pulls everyone aside and she's like, what's the plan? What can we say? What are we supposed to say? So we come with an idea and we turn back to night and we tell them, we are from Hild. That's like the only country we know. But we tell him that, it satisfies him, and he tells the blood hunter who had been with us on the wagon, Sana, to keep an eye on us. So we enter into the village, finally. As we enter the village, something seems off. It feels off. And Sifina looks around. She can't shake the feeling. So finally, she decides to cast Detect Good and Evil. She wants to know what is going on around here. So she does so. And she notices that there's not much besides lots of undead, the sense of undead beyond the gates, beyond the walls of this little village. But then she looks at this well that's in the center of town, near the gate, and it is just brimming with evil, darkness. It is just horrific, and it just gnaws at her soul just to look at it. And she gets a knot in her stomach. And then she looks around at the others, curious. And she notices something about Cain that she hadn't noticed before. That he is actually undead. This troubles her, but she tries her best to keep it to herself. She notices that Sif has something to do with Fae, and so does Goaz. She has no idea what that means, but she just lets it by. And she points out the well. And she's told that the well had been covered for a long time, and they had uncovered it to get water, of course, because they need water. But then bad things started to happen. And there were those who volunteered to go down into the well to see what is down there. And well, they had not returned. And Sifina is fairly certain they will not return. She can't just shake that feeling, so she decides that it is time to indeed go into the inn and get some sleep. As we arrive into the inn, Trevor goes up to the counter and he meets the bartender, or the innkeeper. She introduces herself as Veronica. She says that they don't have much, and when we tell her that the merchants arrived safely, she is quite relieved. And Trevor gives her some gold, and she tells him that will be more than enough to pay for food and room for the entire party. Now Kane tries to give her some platinum, but she absolutely refuses. So we order food and we sit down at the bar. And Trevor is sitting there, and to the right side of Trevor is Sifina. To the right side of Sifina is Kane. Now, of course, you have to remember that Kane is undead, and Sifina knows that. So she starts giving Kane these looks. The first look says, "Can't believe you're undead." And Kane gives her the look that says, "Don't you dare tell anybody." So they're kind of communicating just with facial expressions. But there's a problem. Trevor, who's sitting next to Sifina, before the tournament, he drank a potion that made him obsessed with the first person he looked at after drinking it. And that person ended up being Sifina. So he is obsessed with her for a week. And this is like day 3. So he sees the facial expressions between Sifina and Kane, and he misunderstands it. And he begins to get jealous. And as he tries to fight that down, that jealousy continues to grow. And as that happens, he can't help it but control it. So finally, he just grabs a plate and he throws it at Kane, almost hitting Sifina. And of course, Sifina and Kane just look at each other like, what was that? What? And then Trevor just storms out. So Kane and Sifina are very confused. But Sifina decides to go check on Trevor and make sure that he's okay. So she goes out there, and Sif has decided to stay outside as well because he's a wolf and he wants to keep watch. And so she checks on Trevor, who cannot explain why he's feeling the way he's feeling. So he's just embarrassed and ashamed, and he apologizes. She says, "This is not a very good first impression. We just got here. People do not trust us anyway, so please try not to do that again." And he agrees, so she goes inside to go find a room. And that is the visit at the inn. So all of us go to bed, but Sif stays outside, and we sleep. Sif, of course, has a dream. He wakes up as a human in his house. He goes to a room, and there was a crib. So he goes to the crib, and inside the crib is an empty bird cage. And he hears a bird outside. It sounds like a baby. So he rushes outside, and the moment he gets outside, he reverts back to wolf form. And while he's out there, he encounters Rabbit again. And Rabbit taunts him, saying, "Sparrow tried to fly away from Mother, but she was caught and returned. But don't worry, her wings are clipped now." And of course, Sif tries to persuade Rabbit to return Sparrow to him. But Rabbit just laughs at him. So, what does Sif do? Sif lunges at Rabbit and tears into him, killing him. Or so he hopes, or wishes, because Rabbit then appears behind him, laughing at him. And this goes on back and forth again and again, and finally, Sif just howls. And that howl is a howl of sadness and grief. Now the howl wakes Sifina, who recognizes it as something as sadness and grief, and it worries her. So she rushes downstairs to find Sif sitting at the bar, seemingly perfectly fine. She greets him, and he greets her nonchalantly. And she's very confused. She asks, is he okay? And he says he's fine. By that time, of course, everybody else has come downstairs. And they're just all, getting the day started. So Sifina looks around and she sees that most of the tavern is actually empty. So she takes the opportunity to pull Kane aside and actually talk to him. Okay, so you are undead. How does this work? Can you walk in the sunlight? He just laughs. He's like, Sifina, how often have you seen me in broad daylight at your temple back home? And she, of course, is like, I don't know how long you've been undead. I've been undead for 30 years. So Sifina is very flustered. And she's like, okay, so have you fed recently? And he's like, no. Well, what are we going to do about that? She's like, I don't know. Well, then Sifina realizes that Kane is looking at her like she is food. And of course, mind you, this is very intimidating for Sifina. So they talk a little bit, and Sifina asks, okay, is there anything we should be aware of before you, slaughter all of us? And Kane points out, well, my eyes turn from gold to red. If they go red, that is bad. Actually, he points out, that is the warning on my eyeball. Now, apparently it's written in Celestial, and Sifina can read Celestial, so she's seen it, but she didn't actually notice that it was a warning. So she tells him, I thought it was just poetic. And Kane says, well, you can thank the king for that. So Kane finally Sifina can't do anything about this. She's just done with the situation. And she just says, okay, you can go now. So Kane goes, he goes outside. So Sifina takes a second, and she looks at everybody else around, and she sees Trevor, Sif, and Goaz at the bar. And she hasn't spoken to Goaz yet. Not much, at least. So she decides to ask if he would come over to her. And they sit down and they talk. And she thanks him for finally shooting quite well last time he shot his crossbow, because before that, he didn't do very well. So she thanks him for that. And then she asked, what do you do? What was your job before you came here? And he explained that he worked with security for his family business. And Sifina tries to read him, but she's not getting much from him at all. So she gives up. She's already having a hard day. So she goes to the others with Goaz, and she's asked them, all right, so what's the game plan? And Trevor points out, well, you wanted to go to the Grey Clerics. Now, mind you, you have to bear in mind that the Grey Clerics, there are no more Grey Clerics, yeah. There used to be, but there aren't any. They had apparently, one by one, just walked outside of the city walls and vanished, as if they were following a voice. And Sifina really wants to go to the temple and see if there was anything left over. If they have any journals, any recollection, anything of what is happening in the town. So they decide to go to the temple. So they leave the inn and they go find their way to the temple. So the temple is outside of the village. So they have to walk and go there. And it's not too far away. So finally they arrive at the ruins of the Grave Cleric Temple. The walls are knocked down, at least some of them. The tree has fallen into the midst of one. Grass is overgrown. Windows have knocked out. It is just in ruins. It's nothing like it would have been in its glory days. So they approach, and Sifina notices that there was a graveyard beside the church. But there was something off about everything. So she decides to cast Detect Good and Evil once more. And as she does so, she's on the threshold of the church door. So she is both inside and outside of the church, and she can sense two different kinds of corruption. One in the church and one in the graveyard. She takes note of this, but then she decides to go into the church and investigate. And while they're there, they noticed that there is a tapestry of Tenelith there at the far side of the church. And this confuses Sifina because people of this continent should be worshipping elementals, not spirits, and definitely not Tenelith. So what are they doing with the temple of her goddess here? And Sif recognizes Tenelith. And he's like, asks Sifina, can you tell me more about Tenelith? So Sifina nods as he tells him, well, Tenelith is a goddess of life and death. She keeps the balance and maintains the balance. And her followers are charged with preserving those whose time it is not yet. So healing people who may be injured and close to dying when it is not their time to die. Or those who have lived beyond their time or come back from the dead, they are to be killed. Sifina thinks of Cain being undead. This is problematic for her, but she's focusing. So while she's in the temple, she senses celestial powers fighting or corrupting. She doesn't know how to describe it, but they're all being pulled toward the tapestry. That is the center of this, and this just the corruption. It is the celestial powers that are corrupting each other, and it's not how it should be. And as Sifina is listening and focusing and trying to figure out what's going on, she actually hears something. She hears a voice that sounds like Tenelith calling her and telling her, come and follow me. But Sifina knows that can't be Tenelith, because Tenelith has never actually verbally spoken to her. She communicates with emotions. But she heard his voice, and she turns back to the others and she tells them, I heard it. And Trevor is alarmed. He's like, you heard what? And she tells him, I heard the voice telling me to come follow it. Immediately, Trevor unsheathes his sword and asks, like, who do we have to kill? But Sifina calms him. She tells him, but it can't be Tenelith, because Tenelith doesn't communicate that way. So they try to go through the church and find books, anything that might be of value, anything that might have information, but not finding anything. And it's around this time that they notice that Cain is not with them. Cain has not entered the church. Instead, he's gone around back to the graveyard. And when Sifina realizes this, her eyes widen as she turns to Trevor as he tells him, there's something wrong outside. There's another form of corruption outside. We have to go. So they rush to the graveyard to try to find Cain and help him make sure he doesn't die. So as they approach, they find this man digging a grave. He has black hats and bandages covering his eyes, and he's just digging his grave. And as they approach, he looks up like as to look at them and tells them the services will begin shortly. And Cain frowns and informs him, the church is in ruins. What are you talking about? And the person pauses for a second and then smiles and looks past all of them as if to look at Sifina, even though he can't see her because of his blindfold. But he looks like he recognizes her. But she is confused. She's like, do I know you? He's like, no, you do not. But you may call me Mikkel. And there is a child in the mountains that needs to be saved. The scales need to be balanced. And Cain asks, what mountain? Where? And Mikkel turns to him and tells him, "Oh, don't worry. There's someone else here for you. Someone who misses you." And Kane freezes because of the implication of what that means. He knows what that means. So Trevor decides to use divine sense to determine who this person is. But to his surprise, he senses nothing. This person does not even exist. And this is very, very troubling. And again, Mikkel turns to Safina and he tells her once more, "There is a child in the mountains you need to save. But first," he says, "why don't you help these children?" And then he proceeds to raise the undead from the ground beneath him. And that, my friends, is where the session ended. And I cannot wait for the next game because I am very curious to see how this goes. So I hope you enjoy this. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for listening, everyone. If you like the story so far, leave a like. And if you want to hear more, subscribe. Remember to always check for mimics underneath that bed of yours. We'll see you next time.